Welcome to the Logos Dialogues.
I'm Michelle.
And I'm Alan. And we're here to engage in truth-seeking dialogues about the Logos of God. Hi, fellow truth seekers. This is our second episode of the Logos Dialogues. And now is the time that we really want to start talking about the concept of the blue and the red pill.
You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
What about people who are not as much into the Matrix as you are, who don't know what you're talking about?
Right. I hope everybody out there has seen The Matrix. This is one of my favorite movies. The first one is. And it's like a Christian allegory. Maybe one day we'll have a chance to just do a dialogue about that movie. This concept of the red and the blue pill is the concept of, do you want the blue pill, which means your life will stay the way it is? Do you want to stay in your comfort zone? Do you want to go back to things that were easy to understand? Then take the blue pill, right? Or do you want to deal with the hard truth, the stuff that's real but that's not easy to deal with? If you want to deal with that, you'll take the red pill, and that's going to send you down the rabbit hole, as they say in the movie.
Sounds a little scary to me.
Yeah, I mean, in each situation, we have a comfort zone. Sometimes we want to stay in that zone. And then sometimes we're ready to take on new ideas and new challenges. That's what we're offering right now, is for people to ask themselves, do you want a challenge, or do you want to go back to your comfort zone and stay where you were? You know, in fact, Jesus basically had this same kind of concept when he talked to Nathaniel in the book of John.
Okay, I'll read that. John chapter 1, verses 47 to 50. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said of him, "Here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." "How do you know me?" Nathanael asked. Jesus answered, "I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you." Then Nathanael declared, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus said, "You believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree. You will see greater things than that."
It's just amazing, all the things that are going on in that verse. We see that Jesus is revealing to Nathanael that he saw him in a vision. He saw him before he met him, when Nathanael was alone under a tree, right? He saw Nathanael, and Nathanael knows something happened there. Probably he was maybe praying to God that God would send him a sign or something, but that Jesus is now the sign, right? He's sure of it because of what Jesus just said. Yet Jesus is saying, you haven't seen anything yet. And that, we're going to go through stuff that, takes this concept of the Spirit, seeing things with spiritual eyes, to a new height, where you're literally seeing things, entering heaven and coming out of heaven, right? It's just an amazing level of concepts that are coming Nathanael's way because he's choosing to walk with Jesus. Same idea with the red pill or the blue pill. Of course, if Nathanael doesn't want the challenge, he can go back to his old life, or he can take the red pill and follow Jesus into the difficult times that were ahead of them. But the rewarding times, they were very rewarding. Unfortunately for us, we a lot of times would rather that we don't get challenged with difficult concepts. We want to stay in a bubble, so to speak. It's like a bubble or a comfort zone or an echo chamber. We want to stay in a world where people don't challenge us, where people give us the same, talk to us about the same things all the time and never take us out of ideas that will come
And
from
we do that, I guess, as Christians, but we also do that in the political realm.
Right.
We do that when it comes to gender and sexual identity issues. I mean, we want to talk to people who agree with us.
That's right.
And we don't necessarily, we're not comfortable having conversations with people who have a strong view on the other side of what we believe. Right.
And that's a sad thing. It's a sad thing because a lot of times these interesting dialogues that can happen would change. It wouldn't necessarily. They're not going to. And I believe this with my heart that it's not going to necessarily change our view about who God is, but it can enhance our view, help us grow an understanding that comes from looking at things in different ways. Everybody has, if you think about it, has a front, a back, a left, and a right. You can see something from one side, and then you don't know what the back looks like until you go around and take another look at it.
Well, side. When you talked about the bubble, though, it makes me think of the old movie, for those of us who are old, The Boy in the Plastic Bubble.
Yeah.
And there are some kids that have to stay kind of in this bubble where they're protected from germs.
Right.
And so you don't want them to go out because they might die. So a lot of it's fear. A lot of it is fear that people, especially within the Christian world, that you don't want your children to fall away from God. So you keep them sometimes in this bubble.
Right.
To protect them. And so, what would you say about that kind of fear that people have?
Yeah, I mean, that fear, the fear of the unknown or the fear of people disagreeing, it is really real and especially relevant when you're talking about children. Children, in a lot of cases, are going to not understand things and misunderstand. And so we have PG movies, we have rated R movies, we have, G movies, right? Because we're trying to protect children from things that could be harmful for them because they don't know how to think about it. But at the same time, our goal is that children grow mature enough to be able to handle concepts when we're not around as their parents. And unfortunately, sometimes we protect children in such a way that when they get older, they still can't handle hard concepts.
So like when they go to college.
Like when they go to college. And that's a real challenge for us because these ideas that we're going to talk about, a lot of the ideas outside of the Christian bubble, kids do address in college. And they do address when they leave their families and go into other
But a lot of times
circles.
they don't know how to do it within the context of the Bible.
Right. And they don't believe they can because their parents and the churches they were from or something stayed away from those issues. They just didn't talk about them. So in their mind, it must have been a reason, right, that the Bible can't deal with these things, when in fact it can. And so our challenge is to get out of a bubble that harms us, but not to be totally against the idea of, maintaining some kind of boundaries, when we're dealing with issues. Those are reasonable things to do. A bubble isn't a bad thing in itself. It's just when you're afraid to go outside to have conversations that can be helpful. But it's not just a problem for Christians. It's not just a problem for political people, for people inside of different social, economic, social, sexual issues. I think it's also a problem for the sciences, which is the scientists claim to be, people who are skeptics, meaning they don't take things as truth unless they're given evidence. They don't just join a group and have the group convince them. They have to be given proof. But that's not always the case with scientists. There's some things that make up the bubble that they live in. And I like to think of it as the time-space continuum. Like anything that's outside of time and space, they don't believe it's real, right? I mean, if you're talking about things that are outside of the three dimensions of space and the dimension of time, they think, how can we know these things are real? So they don't take them seriously. But you can find evidence for things that are outside of time and space. And we're going to get to those things when we talk about next week.
Okay.
In our next dialogue.
I was going to ask you what kind of things are they. Okay.
Well, the Bible is amazing in the way that it brings evidence that is basically proof that there's something going on outside of the time-space continuum. We can talk about that more. We're going to look at that, but not in this dialogue, but we'll talk about that in the next dialogue.
Always have to give a teaser.
Yes, that's important, an important one for us to think about, because there is evidence, just like we talked about. In fact, let's go back to that scripture about faith in Hebrews 11:1.
Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen.
Yes, again, we're going to have evidence for those things that are hard to see, the things that are invisible. But again, one of the things about the bubble is that if you're looking in terms of our time, space, continue more, if you're just looking at things the way you want to look at things, you're missing some of the things that come from looking at it from another perspective. Mm-hmm. We talked about how wind is like the unseen thing, and we can see the effect of wind. But we also, in the world that we live in now with science and technology, we know wireless technologies exist that show us some wireless effects, radio waves or, infrared waves, also any kind of electromagnetic wave. Those things are real, and our technologies use them to help us communicate in over time and space. But, invisible waves help us communicate with each other. That idea is so important because my phone is always receiving invisible updates, but or invisible communications. But I can't hear those invisible things myself. The phone has to interpret them, decode them, and then send me the information, right? So the fact that invisible things exist.
And we believe it. We believe that these things are happening.
Absolutely.
Because we have evidence of it.
Because we have evidence. If the phone thought that all of those invisible communications were just noise and it didn't decode them, then I couldn't use it to communicate. Mm-hmm. But because it has this, and it's basically like faith. The phone knows these things that are coming across the airwaves, right, are communications, and it decodes them. The same way a child, when a baby is born, doesn't know how to understand language, doesn't know how to understand the noise that's coming at them from the parent. But when the baby decides that the parent is trying to communicate with the baby has some faith that that noise must have some meaning. And therefore, the baby takes the noise seriously and starts to try to understand it, starts to decode it. In other words, because of the faith that a baby has, and maybe a cat doesn't have the same faith. Maybe when I talk to my cat, there's not the same faith. But when I talk to my child, my baby, the baby decodes the information because they believe it's meaningful. And we need the same kind of faith. If God, and He is, but there is a God who is trying to communicate with us, and the communications are happening in a spiritual realm, and that spiritual realm is invisible, but it shows, there's evidence for it. Are we going to take it as noise, or are we going to work through the difficulty and try to interpret it so that we can, at some point, over time, it takes time, we can at some point understand what this communication is. We can understand the language that is being taught, communicated with us. As a baby learns a language by first having faith that there's a child, that there's a relationship being established. This is what Hebrews 11:6 is all about. Read that.
And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to Him must believe that He exists and that He rewards those who earnestly seek Him.
So our core concept with faith is that if you believe that there is an existing being, which we'll show some evidence for it in the next dialogue, right? That He's trying to communicate with you. And if you believe that, and that He wants to communicate with you like a parent wants to communicate with their child, then there's a reward for seeking that relationship. And if you believe in that, it's the faith, that faith will allow you to, over time, understand the relationship, understand the communication, understand how spiritual language works with God. How, like Jesus was telling Nathaniel, right? You'll understand over time that there's things going on in the spiritual realm that are coming from heaven, that are coming and going, right? Between you and God. And it's a beautiful thing that you can start to understand, but it starts with faith.
And that makes me think of a couple of things that I'm going through right now in my life, where I've decided that I wanted to try to learn to speak Spanish in a way that I can really communicate with Hispanic people. And so that has taken a lot of faith on my part. It's kind of like what you're just saying with the child learning how to speak the language of the parent. I have to believe that one day I will be able to understand what people are saying to me, and I'll be able to speak it. And so it takes practice, and it takes really being committed to it, to earnestly seek it.
Right.
It takes work on my part, and not to give up, and not to say, not to get frustrated, because I think sometimes people get frustrated at God like that. They think, well, God, where are you? I don't hear you right now. I don't feel you. I don't see you. I'm not experiencing you. But you have to have that faith that as you do the things that God calls you to do, then you will get to a better relationship with Him. And so I have that faith that as I practice the ways that I'm supposed to be in with the language, that I will get better and better at it and better able to communicate with people. And the other thing that I'm doing now is learning to play the piano. And that definitely is just a lot of, and it's kind of sad because every time I start a new song, I get frustrated, because I think I'll never learn the song. But then I just have to think back of the song that I did before, that I felt the same way, but I knew that I had to just practice and practice and practice, and eventually, I'll get into it. I'll start understanding it. I have to earnestly seek it, and I have to have the faith, though. And I tell that to myself. You have to believe, Michelle. You have to believe that you're going to get better at this. And so, faith is such an important thing in the things that we have to do.
And you're mentioning the frustration. It made me picture a baby that cries. And again, the baby is trying. The baby thinks, okay, I got it. This is what mom means, or this is what dad means. And then something doesn't work that they try, and then they start crying, right? The baby gets frustrated.
They don't understand me.
They don't understand me. Why aren't they trying harder, right? And they think it's the parents' fault, when in fact, it's just that the baby's on a road to understanding.
And the baby does. And they end up understanding and communicating.
They stop having tantrums later. Hopefully they do. Some people never do. But hopefully they get to that place where they say, why was I so upset at God? Why was I so upset at my parents? When in fact, all they were trying to do was help me through this challenging process of learning how to communicate. Which is it's a challenging process, not just with your parents, but when you're trying to learn how to communicate.
And it takes a lot of trust.
Right? It takes trust. Really learning to trust that the one who created us wants the best for us. The one who created us really loves us, that He really has a desire for us to seek Him. And trying to get to that, sometimes people have to look at themselves and really see in the mirror, do I have a negative view of life, or do I have a positive view? That good things exist in this world, and that good things can exist for me, even better things than what I can bring about for myself. I mean, that's our challenge here. That's just a little bit of faith, a little bit of trust. A baby hopefully has that faith in their parents, and we hopefully can encourage people to have that faith in God. Just a little bit of faith, because it'll take you a long way. And in fact, once you have it, you can start really looking at the scriptures now and understand the scriptures in a new light. The book that God created when He started a dialogue with us is a miraculous book, an ancient book and a miraculous book. But what's so miraculous is that even though it's so old, it's full of new ideas. A lot of young people think that the older things are, the less relevant they are in their lives. But that's not true. It constantly changes the way people think of things, the way people look at things, and introduces new ideas. It's not just an ancient book, but it's always introducing new things. But people don't always want new things. It takes them out of their comfort zone. Jesus spoke about this again in Luke, if we could read that.
Luke 5:36-39. He told them this parable. No one tears a piece out of a garment to patch an old one. Otherwise, they will have torn the new garment, and the patch from the new will not match the old. And no one pours new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the new wine will burst the skins. The wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, new wine must be poured into new wineskins. And no one, after drinking old wine, wants the new, for they say, the old is better.
So he's saying some amazing things here. One thing he's saying is that, this new wine that's coming, right, is going to challenge people, right? New wine is always going to have it's going to have difficulty staying in the old container. It's going to burst it, right? But but he's also challenging people because he's saying he's bringing new wine. He's bringing the new. Yet it's going to challenge things and break them open. Break them wide open. In fact, that red pill again comes to mind. We're going to see people's minds blown. next, come back next week if you want to see some minds blown. But the other thing that's happening is he's also saying that people are going to choose the old because they want to stay in their comfort zone. They're going to say, "Look, you know what? Old is better. I don't like this new stuff." And that's one of the challenges young people have. Is a lot of times. They're trying to learn. They're trying to address the new things that are going on. They're trying to pick up what's going on in college. And they bring all this new ideas, and their parents are like, "I like the old better." We want to show how the Bible can address these new things. Mm-hmm. The Bible does talk about things that are always new, but it's going to be hard to understand that without going through the basic premise of what the scriptures are. The scriptures aren't just what people think they are. They're more. They're actually more than just this idea that God talked to us. It goes deeper than that. The rabbit hole goes deeper than just God talked to us. It goes a lot deeper, and we're going to get to that in the next in the challenges that we're going to raise next week. So this is our invitation to you to come back again as you join us for the Logos Dialogues.